Joining us now with more insight on the budget dispute and other big headlines in politics this week. Fresh off a late night at Beyonce's concert last night.
A very late night, I might add.
Extra late night. Paul Lisnick
Till
is here.
1:15 in the morning. I was going to wear my cowboy Lisnick thing, but I didn't.
You opted to leave it there.
Yeah, I left it there.
Well, let's start locally here.
Sure.
Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss jumping in the race for Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky's seat.
And not a surprise.
No.
I mean, maybe some were, but look, he just won re-election for a second term as the mayor of Evanston. He's got his challengers there, but he's overall fairly popular. And it was no surprise to me. I've known him for many years that he was looking broader than that. Didn't say anything. He was on my show just a couple of weeks ago. Didn't point to this at all, but it was no question because Schakowsky had not yet said she was going to retire. Once that happened, it opens up the floodgates. Doing very well financially. He raised a ton of money in 24 hours. He's up against a podcaster who lives out of state, has to move into that area. So he starts off, I think, in a strong position. We'll see how it plays out.
All right, let's broaden the political picture. I want to talk about President Trump. Qatar offered the president a $400 million airplane. I want to know, do you think that will be allowed by Congress? Is it allowed by law? Aside from the security, the retrofitting questions, why are we here in this moment?
And it raises the question, does it really matter whether the law allows it? Because the Republicans who control Congress essentially haven't stopped anything. But specifically to your question, yes, a $400 million plane. We now are seeing the budgets for what it will take to retrofit that plane. You don't just take Trump loves that it's a 747, I get that. But you don't take that plane and say, all yours now, because you can be sure that there are bugs, and I don't mean bugs meaning listening bugs, electronic devices on there, and other issues. I mean, this plane has to be one of the most secure plane in the world. It's carrying the President of the United States. Estimates on getting it up to snuff are going to be between $750 million and $1 billion. So the cost of the plane rate pales in comparison to spending double or more just to get it ready.
But the emoluments part of this, I mean, there are precedents, right? The Statue of Liberty is one that people have brought up.
I'm glad you said that because, yes, there are some representatives, maybe we should give the Statue of Liberty back. The Statue of Liberty was a gift to the American people, placed in the public for use and visitation by the world and by the public. Very different situation. With regard to this, it's a very strong argument that it violates the emoluments clause, but again, nothing else that President Trump has done in his first term or now has gotten any Republican to go after him. But in this situation, what is really clear is Congress must approve it. So whether Congress just takes it on and says, fine, he wants it, we'll give it to him, but they need to do that in order to make it work. The plan is that it goes to the Pentagon for his use as president, and then it gets transferred over to the Trump Library. Of course, he will control the Trump Library. Where a lot of people see problems is if he uses it as a private plane when he's out of office. He says he won't. We'll see. But right now, I think that plane, for everything they have to do, the odds of it being ready during his presidential term, very little. Probably won't be ready until 2029.
Well, let's talk about the president's visit to the Middle East. He visited Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia.
But he didn't
visit Israel, even though he was in the region.
And there's, we could spend all night just talking about that trip, but the bottom line is that he didn't meet with Netanyahu, he didn't go to Israel, and that really is a personal snub for somebody who they have such a very close relationship, and we know that Netanyahu certainly supported President Trump in getting back into office. So, yeah, it was a bit of I don't know if it's a surprise, but Trump is not happy with how things are going over there, and that was a snub. So we will see how things get patched up now that he is back or coming back to the States. We'll see how it goes. But, yeah, that was a surprise.
On that trip, Saudi Arabia agreeing to invest $600 billion in the U.S., but the details about that investment are a little vague. What's going on there?
Well, and Trump has said that he's going to turn that into $1 trillion investment. I mean, it may happen. And look, I'll give kudos to President Trump where they're due. He may very well have triggered some deals which have significant investment coming into the country from those areas. But look, there's no question that the people who still harbor ill will towards the murder of Khashoggi, the journalist, and all these things, that stuff just seems to be gone now, out the window. The president has a very good relationship with those countries in the Middle East. He sees the possibilities of all that are going on. By the way, news recently that apparently the United States is working to move 1 million Palestinians out of that area and over to Lebanon. So, he needs cooperation in the Middle East. He needs friends in the Middle East, and that's part of what he was doing, was building up those friendships.
Let's talk about the president's agenda. His big budget bill failed in a House committee today. It will get another vote, as we reported Sunday evening. What's your expectations there with these hardline Republicans?
Yeah, they're hardline until that phone call comes in. You know, it was sort of like the last bill that they did. I love watching some of the really tough Republicans who will then come on the air and say, I'm a no vote, I'm a no vote, and then magically they're a yes vote by the time. And here's what happens. So what's going to happen over this weekend while they're negotiating, President Trump is back. He's going to call, I promise you, every one of those no Republicans personally. And if they're on the floor, he'll get them into the cloakroom. And because it's been heard, it's been said before that you can actually hear President Trump yelling at them that they better get on board or they'll face a primary. So my best guess is they will find a way to get this through the House. The Republican representatives will find a way to say, well, here's what changed, and we'll see. The Medicaid issue is obviously still big. The spin on that is that the Democrats are saying you're cutting Medicaid. A lot of people throwing off health care. Republicans are saying, well, we're saving money in Medicaid. Well, it's a nice spin on the term, but if the Congressional Budget Office is correct, there will be millions of people who will lose their medical coverage or won't be able to afford it.
States can't shoulder that.
And the states can't afford that. So, again, we'll see what kind of modifications get passed, but those representatives will get personal calls from President Trump. My prediction, they all go on board.
Let's talk about health. Prescription drug prices obviously too high for so many people. The president issuing an executive order. He says that could bring them down immediately 30 to 80%, getting us in line with what Europeans pay for prescriptions. How likely is that to happen immediately?
So there's some stuff that just isn't accurate within that statement. First of all, and some people forget that President Biden actually had Congress pass a law that lowered the price. Remember, there was a list of 10 drugs, and
right.
we were doing group, and that's because Congress has to do that. So Congress made those changes with a variety of laws. Republicans in Congress have actually tried to reverse those. They've been reversing that because, of course, they prefer to work with the drug companies. But that being said, with all due respect, I mean, the Trump's effort to have drug prices lowered is a wonderful effort, but an executive order doesn't do it. So the only way that happens is if the drug company says, we'll do it for you. And that may be, right, to curry favor with him. So they may say that, but it has no power in and of, or authority in and of itself to make it happen. Congress would have to step in to do it. But by the way, when you look at drug prices in the U.S. versus other countries, it's not as bad as it looks. There are countries that we get better prices than, countries that get better prices than us. Hopefully there will be a discussion about it, but Congress still needs to step into
Let's talk about immigration. The Supreme Court blocked further deportations of
Today.
Venezuelans by the Alien Enemies Act. What are your expectations there? What does it say about due process and all
So let's
this?
be clear, and that's exactly the way to put it, Ray, because be clear about what happened. They did not say that the president does not have the authority under the Alien Enemies Act to do what he's, to do what he's doing. They didn't address that. What they said was due process is critical. It's what they said when they first imposed this pause in what was going on. It's about due process. The administration says, well, we're going to give people 12 hours to figure this out. Supreme Court says, no, not enough. You need more time. So today's stay and continuation basically is about people have to have time to fight for habeas corpus, have their day in court. It's all about due process. That's what the court had to say. They did not rule about the Alien Enemies Act. It's another discussion, but to say that we're under invasion right now, which is what you have to be able to say to use that act, sounds good, except the president's also closed the border. So if you've closed the border, how are we being invaded? You've fixed the problem. So we'll see where that goes.
Close the border, but the Trump administration is bringing in refugees from South Africa.
They are bringing white South African refugees, and it's a lot of people say that he's bringing in white people, he's sending out the brown people and stuff. People will have their own decisions and opinions about that. The one part that concerns me is they've just removed protective status for Afghans, those people who are in this country and were brought here who worked with our troops as interpreters to save their lives, and they did that, and their protections have been taken, which means they get sent back perhaps to Afghanistan, maybe to a prison. I don't know, but their lives are truly in danger. I'm not sure that's, to be honest, the great way for America to say thank you to people who saved American troops' lives.
Briefly, what's coming up Sunday?
This Sunday, we're going to take a look at the transit budget, which they're still working on. I'll be joined by Senator Ram Villavalam. You say that 5 times. And we're going to talk about where all of that goes. And always want to mention the midday show when I do an author interview there. Next Thursday, I'll be talking to author Amanda Lippman. She has written the book, When We Are in Charge. It's all about young people need to have and will soon have their day to take over politics. And wouldn't that be nice? Get some young people involved.
It sure would.
Thank you,
Paul.
guys.
Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
Go back to Beyonce.